Al Capone wasn't born a legend. He became one because of a government decision that changed the flow of money in America. In 1920, when the United States outlawed alcohol under the 18th Amendment, it didn't just close bars. It opened one of the most profitable black markets in modern history. Prohibition wasn't a moral victory. It was an unintended business plan. Overnight, something millions of people wanted became illegal. The result? The laws erased competition and handed an entire industry to whoever had the courage and ruthlessness to claim it. That's where Capone stepped in. To the public, he was a gangster, but in reality, he was a businessman operating in a system created by government policy, not free market principles. Every bottle sold illegally, every speakeasy opened in defiance of the law, proved one timeless economic truth. When lawmakers ignore demand, someone else will meet it at a premium. Prohibition promised to end crime, poverty, and abuse. Instead, it built an empire, one fueled by money, corruption, and control. And at the center of it all was Al Capone, a man who turned law into opportunity, vice into enterprise, and chaos into one of the greatest business stories ever told. Chicago in the 1920s wasn't just a city, it was a storm of jazz, smoke, and desperation. The bars went dark, but the thirst didn't die. When the government slammed the doors on alcohol, the back doors creaked open, and that's where Al Capone stepped in. He didn't see bootlegging as rebellion, he saw it as opportunity born from hypocrisy. The law said no, but the people whispered yes, and Capone knew how to listen. While rival gangs fought over scraps, he built a system structured, disciplined, and terrifyingly efficient. Capone designed his empire like a modern corporation, only without ethics or regulation. He owned the supply chain from start to finish, secret breweries hidden in abandoned factories, trucks disguised as milk deliveries, and a network of speakeasies that pulsed like arteries beneath the city. Every bottle of whiskey was a calculated act of defiance, and every glass poured meant profit. But Capone wasn't just running liquor, he was running trust. In a world where the law could be bought, loyalty became the currency. Bartenders, drivers, police officers, everyone had a price, and Capone paid in both fear and generosity. His empire pulled in nearly $100 million a year, a staggering sum for the era, the kind of money that warped morality. Adjusted for inflation, it's over $1.5 billion today. But numbers only tell half the story. The real power came from control, over politicians, over police, and over public perception. And that might have been his genius. He didn't just hide from society, he blended into it. He ate at the best restaurants, donated to charities, smiled for the papers. To some, he was evil. To others, a symbol of defiance, the man who gave the people what the law took away. Al Capone wasn't fighting the system. He was profiting from its contradictions. By the late 1920s, Al Capone wasn't just a name whispered in dark alleys, he was a brand. His empire had grown so large, so sophisticated, that even the people tasked with destroying it were secretly feeding off it. Money flowed like bootleg whiskey into pockets, campaigns, and police pensions. City officials cashed envelopes sealed in silence. Detectives who raided Capone's bars on Monday were drinking in them by Friday. Corruption wasn't a side effect of Prohibition, it was its bloodstream. Chicago became a place where morality had a price tag. Judges took bribes, cops sold protection, politicians smiled for the cameras, promising reform while shaking Capone's hand behind closed doors. Every level of authority was compromised, and Capone knew it. He once said, "I own the police." He wasn't bragging. He was stating a business fact. But beneath that control, the cracks were spreading. Rival gangs wanted a piece of the empire, and Chicago turned into an urban battlefield. Drive-bys, bombings, assassinations, all to protect territory worth millions. The St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929 was the turning point. 7 men shot dead in broad daylight, dressed like ordinary workers. The blood ran across the snow, and suddenly America couldn't pretend this was just a liquor problem. Capone's greatest weapon, his invisibility behind layers of influence, began to falter. Newspapers branded him public enemy number 1. Politicians, once in his pocket, now distanced themselves in fear. The same system he'd fed for years was preparing to consume him. Because here's the truth: corruption is never loyalty. It's temporary obedience to power. And when that power starts to fade, so does the protection. As the heat rose, Capone did what any smart businessman would. He diversified. Gambling, prostitution, protection rackets, anything that kept the cash flowing. But the shadow of prohibition was shrinking. Public sentiment was changing, and the same government that created the black market was preparing to end it. The empire built on scarcity was about to face its reckoning, not in the streets but in the ledgers. For years, Al Capone had outsmarted bullets, rival gangs, and police raids. But the one thing he couldn't outrun was math. Numbers, clean, quiet, and undeniable, became his undoing. By 1931, America was changing. The Great Depression had hit hard. Breadlines stretched for blocks, unemployment soared, and public anger had found a new target: the rich who thrived while everyone else suffered. Capone, once seen as a kind of folk hero, now symbolized greed, corruption, and decay. The government needed a win, and Capone was the perfect villain. The irony? They couldn't prove his biggest crimes. The bootlegging, the violence, the murders, all hidden behind layers of intermediaries and cash-only deals. But one small department in Washington noticed something everyone else ignored. He never paid taxes. Enter the accountants, the unlikeliest heroes of the gangster era. Armed not with guns but with ledgers, they combed through receipts, fake companies, and bank deposits. What they found was the paper trail of an empire that had been too successful to hide. In October 1931, the verdict came down: guilty on 5 counts of tax evasion, 11 years in federal prison. Just like that, the most powerful man in Chicago was stripped of everything. Not by a rival gang, not by the police, but by paperwork. When Capone arrived at Alcatraz, the island fortress designed for America's most dangerous criminals, he wasn't the untouchable king anymore. The isolation broke him. The disease he'd carried for years, untreated syphilis, began to eat away at his mind. The man who once ran an empire couldn't even tie his own tie. Meanwhile, the world outside changed overnight. In 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition. Liquor flowed legally again. Breweries reopened. Governments taxed what they once outlawed. His empire wasn't destroyed by rival bullets. It was erased by a policy reversal, the same kind of policy that had made him rich in the first place. Capone didn't just lose a business. He lost the very foundation of his power: scarcity. And that is the cruel symmetry of his story. The government that accidentally created his fortune was the same one that dismantled it. Al Capone's empire didn't collapse because it was immoral. It collapsed because the rules changed, and he didn't. That's the real story hiding beneath the headlines and Hollywood myths. Capone wasn't just a criminal. He was a mirror reflecting the laws, incentives, and hypocrisies of his time. The same government that declared a war on alcohol accidentally created $1 trillion black market, and when it reversed course, it simply handed that market back to itself, legalized and taxable. Capone didn't invent corruption. He monetized it. He saw what few others did, that laws can create opportunity as easily as they destroy it. Every regulation, every ban, every restriction changes the flow of money. And where money flows, new empires rise. Look around today. The players have changed, but the mechanics haven't. When marijuana was illegal, small-time growers and smugglers built underground fortunes. When legalization arrived, those fortunes moved to corporations and stock tickers. When crypto was unregulated, early adopters became millionaires. Now, as oversight grows, institutions are quietly taking the reins. That's the same economic rhythm Capone understood instinctively. Policy creates scarcity. Scarcity creates profit, and profit attracts power. But there's a darker side to that rhythm, one that still defines the modern economy. When the system creates artificial scarcity, the people on the margins always pay the price. Prohibition punished ordinary drinkers while enriching the few bold enough to break the rules. Today, inflated housing markets, restricted energy supply, or manipulated monetary policy all echo that same pattern. The illusion changes, but the outcome doesn't. Wealth concentrates and the game resets. Capone's story isn't ancient history, it's a financial case study, one that keeps repeating in new disguises. Because at its core, this isn't about alcohol or crime. It's about how markets respond when laws ignore reality. And reality always wins. When the demand exists, supply will follow, legally, illegally, or digitally. The only question is who understands it first. So, what can you take from Capone's empire? Understand the rules, but more importantly, understand who writes them. Follow incentives, not slogans. Watch where scarcity is created, because that's where opportunity hides. History doesn't repeat, it evolves. And those who learn its patterns don't just survive change, they profit from it. If this changed how you see power, money, or history, subscribe, because the past isn't dead. It's the blueprint for everything coming next.